Hello and welcome back to my channel and week 6 of lockdown here in the UK. I hope you are all doing well and staying safe, and I thought today I would talk about my own experience with anxiety. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, please hang around. If you feel that anxiety and things like depression are simply a case of stop being anxious, stop worrying, this probably isn't the video for you. But if you're like me and you've experienced sort of not normal anxiety, and by normal anxiety I mean things like, maybe the anxiety you feel before an exam, or a big situation, and that sort of anxiety is normal in everyday life. I think with everything that's going on with COVID, we're all a bit more anxious, but from my point of view, my anxiety can be overwhelming, it can be constant. I have a sort of diagnosis of catastrophizing anxiety, where I will almost worry about things that haven't actually happened yet. And it started to affect everyday life, and my anxiety is out of proportion to maybe a normal situation. So if that sounds like you would like to hear more, then please stick around and don't forget to like and subscribe. So before I talk about my anxiety, obviously my anxiety and my treatments and what works for me is specific to me. Obviously I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert on anxiety. It's just my experience. So obviously you are you, your anxiety is you. So these are just things that have worked and are working for me. So before I was diagnosed, I was experiencing sort of a whole range of symptoms that are related to anxiety, and it would come and go. I would have a feeling of dread for sometimes no reason. I was having difficulty sleeping. I would frequently have episodes where I would feel shaky and dizzy. I would have pins and needles. My heart would be beating much faster. And sort of in itself, I didn't know what was causing it. And for a long while, I thought there's actually something physically wrong with me, because I didn't know what was causing these symptoms. There didn't sometimes seem to be specific causes, and I remember being at work and I couldn't walk to the canteen because when I got to a certain corridor, I just felt like there was something physically stopping me, and I had all these symptoms, and I thought I just want to go back to the safety of my office. And it was a very frightening time because I just didn't know why I was feeling like this. And what sort of all brought it to a head was, I remember it was one Sunday morning and I experienced my first panic attack, and I literally felt like I was having a heart attack. My heart was racing so out of control, and I remember phoning my mum and dad and said I really don't feel well, and they came round, and I just didn't know what was happening, and it was very, very scary. And at that time I was going through a lot of personal stress, and I wasn't coping with that. My mental health really was on a downward spiral, and at that time I was in an environment where if you had a mental health problem, it wasn't talked about. People like me didn't have mental health problems. Depression and anxiety was just a bit of a joke, and you just needed to pull yourself together. So I wasn't really allowed in an environment where I could talk about it, and certainly not go and speak to a doctor or get any help. Luckily, I am out of that environment now, and I know that looking after your mental health is very, very important. And you know, just at that time, I wasn't in that sort of environment. So once I'd had my first panic attack, I thought, you know, there's something physically wrong with me, I need to get some help. So at that point, I went to see my GP, and my GP was really supportive, and sort of did a lot of talking to me, did some sort of blood tests and things just to make sure there wasn't anything sort of medically, physically underlying, but really gave me a lot of support. And what I found, so I went to see my GP, and she'd sort of explored several options, but probably over a period of definitely months to years, what had started off as sort of intermittent anxiety and these sort of isolated periods gradually started to be almost like constant, where, you know, I might worry about one thing and then that might pass and it would be replaced. So it became almost all consuming, really. And I began to have more panic attacks. Supermarkets seemed to be a really bad one. I would go in there with Ben, and I would literally get to the first aisle and all the symptoms just overwhelm me, and I just had to get out and go and sit in the car, and I didn't want to leave the house. And, you know, trying to manage that and live in, you know, everyday life is really, it's just not compatible, is it? You know, you need to be able to leave the house, and you need to be able to, you know, go to a supermarket and do things. And it was just getting to the point where I was getting more and more isolated, and then I needed, you know, some fairly drastic action. But when my GP was like, right, you know, this is getting worse, we need to look at what is causing my anxiety. And in my case, there are obviously lots and lots of causes of anxiety, but one of them in my case was the regulation of sort of mood hormones, and an imbalance. And I've mentioned before, you know, I've suffered from depression from my early 20s, and that is caused by an imbalance of hormones. So I knew that, you know, if I wasn't able to regulate the sort of mood hormones, that maybe I would need to go down the medication route. Genetics can play a big part. You know, my dad has, you know, suffered with sort of mental health problems, so I knew that probably genetically maybe that was something that I just naturally couldn't regulate my mood hormones. And, you know, and that is nothing to be embarrassed about. You know, if you are diabetic and you don't produce enough insulin, you have to take insulin to top yourself up. So if you don't naturally produce enough hormones in your brain to help, you know, regulate your mood, you know, no amount of exercising, eating healthily and trying to be happy all the time is going to change that. So certainly taking medication was something that if I needed to do that, I needed to do that. And, you know, again, that's not everybody's sort of cup of tea, but I thought that seemed quite sensible. My anxiety was really triggered by some traumatic experiences that I was going through and continued to go through. And I needed to really be able to deal with those. I, unfortunately, because I didn't understand why my mental health was deteriorating, turned to alcohol to try and improve my mood, to try and cope. And that is, you know, one of the worst things people can do, as I found out. And also, there are sometimes no reason why one person will be sort of have general anxiety and another person doesn't. So sometimes, you know, you're looking for a reason And in my case, there were, you know, 3 or 4 really good reasons why my anxiety was getting out of control. But again, don't worry if there isn't a reason, because it's just, you know, we're all different, and, you know, one size doesn't fit all. So once I understood sort of the causes of my anxiety, it could then move me on to, well, how can we treat this? What can I do? Can other people help me? And that led me on to sort of looking at different sorts of treatment options. So in terms of treatment options that I've done probably over the last 4 years, my GP referred me to a psychiatrist to try and help with my sort of underlying mental health problems. I was referred for counselling, and I was also referred for CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy. So that was sort of the referrals, and what my GP wanted really from the psychiatrist was, you know, what was maybe sort of medication options. And I started off on one antidepressant, and I was on that for quite a long time, and that wasn't really helping. It wasn't helping with my sort of panic attacks, my anxiety. So the psychiatrist said, let's try this. And also beta blockers. So I'm on a beta blocker that just helps to regulate that sort of panicky. And I also have sort of beta blockers that I can take if I'm experiencing almost a panic attack, and that just helps to slow my heart rate down, which has really been beneficial. So I've sort of been in and out of sort of mental health services, but the sort of reassurance that it's not, you know, there is something physically wrong in the fact that it's an imbalance of chemicals, but the fact that there isn't something, you know, physically wrong was very reassuring. And through the counselling and the psychiatrist and the CBT, I was able to work through a lot of the issues that had happened in the past, and move forward a little bit with my mental health and learn to deal with it in a more proactive way. I got some help for the reliance on alcohol, because, you know, there is no point in taking antidepressants and then taking alcohol, which is a mood depressant. And I then understood the reasons why my mental health had downward spiraled so dramatically, and I was able to deal with some of those issues. And now I don't drink at all, and, you know, that's obviously not a talking point for this video, but maybe in the future I'll be able to talk about that. And things like caffeine, which can sort of increase your heart rate and bring on those symptoms a little bit more, so I try and regulate the amount of caffeine. So that was sort of a two-pronged approach from my GP to get me some help for my mental health, and some things that I could do myself. And over a period probably of several years, just getting that balance of medication and things I can do myself, and being able to talk about some of the things that happened, really enabled me to get my anxiety under control a little bit more. And that's not to say that I don't have times where I don't want to leave the house, or I'm out and those sort of symptoms creep back in. But I'll now talk about some of the things that I do, so that if those things sort of creep back in, I'm able to manage them in a little bit of a better way. At the moment, I feel that my anxiety is certainly more manageable, and that's not to say it's great. It's more like sort of like a little wave, where some days it's better, some days it's worse, and it's just learning to sort of ride that out. one thing I learned through CBT is, especially if I may be out, because I tend to feel safer in the house, if I'm out and those feelings start to come on, I try and focus on my breathing. I think, right, how can I get out of a situation? Not that I necessarily need to, but I think, right, well, I could go and sit down, or so I sort of have a bit of an exit strategy in my head. And I do a lot of grounding, and that's the sort of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, where it's 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch, 3 things that I can hear, 2 things that I can smell, and 1 thing that I can taste. And I have to say, I don't always do them in the right order. But that helps me to focus on sort of the environment around me. And, you know, I can do that quite sort of subconsciously almost, and it just helps just to keep me grounded. I can talk freely about how I'm feeling and what's worrying me, and not feel that I'll be judged or mocked or shamed into not talking about it, and that just being able to express how I'm feeling is massive. I can feel quite overwhelmed if I have a number of things to do, or if there's a lot going on. So, and that brings on more of it raises my anxiety levels, and it can make me sort of panic. And so I try and not to get overwhelmed. I try and write things down to make a plan, have some structure in my day, so that if I've got things to do, I can do them in little chunks, rather than think, I've got to do all this, and then those feelings overwhelm me and I just don't achieve anything. And I also try and do things so that I'm not trying to do everything on the same day, and that just helps me manage my mental health and helps to sort of keep my anxiety within sort of levels that I can manage. I try not to put things off. I'm a great procrastinator, and you know, putting things off, it doesn't make them go away, and it just means I'm worrying about it for a longer period of time. And you know, if I need help with things, I can think, right, I can speak to this person, or maybe I don't know how to do something, so I need to find out how to do it. So I've just learned to try and be able to manage my anxiety with those strategies a bit better. And you know, it's not amazing, but it's certainly not to the same extent. So what I would say, that if you're experiencing any of the things that I've mentioned, is, you know, ask for help, make people around you aware of how you're feeling, because it's okay not to feel okay. It's okay not to know how you're feeling, and it's okay to be overwhelmed with what's going on around you. Especially, you know, we've all been through a situation over the last year that, you know, February, who would have thought that, you know, the impact that coronavirus would have on us all. I also try to not watch too much news and go on social media too much, because I think sometimes you can just be overwhelmed with, you know, news and input. And do you know what really got to me, and just remembered that, is seeing people posting on social media sites going, there's no toilet roll and there's no bread, and it would just be like, oh my goodness. And you know, maybe I didn't need toilet roll or bread, but that sort of constant input of, oh, we all need to be worrying about it. So, you know, look at where you're getting your sources of information, and maybe limit those as much as you can. So I really hope you have found this video interesting, and maybe you can relate to some of the things that I've been through, and it's given you some ideas of maybe if you are feeling anxious, how you can manage it, you know, and make it a little bit more manageable. So thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already done so, for more videos on sort of how I manage my autoimmune conditions and my mental health. I'm doing a bit of sort of meal planning, and also we're doing a bit of decorating. So it's a bit of a mismatch, but it is my life. And yeah, please continue to come along for the ride with me. So thank you so much for watching again, and stay safe, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.